me, and I don't see anyone here. Excuse me. And we do have a quorum, right?
We do.
Okay. And so our first action item is our September 1 minutes. If I could have a motion,
So
please.
make a motion to approve?
Thank you.
Second.
Thank you. All in favor?
Aye.
And now we are going to go to our federal legislative priorities. Brad?
Yeah, so like we did last month with the state legislative agenda, on a piece of paper in front of you is a very draft list of federal legislative priorities, and that Steve and Harry and I have worked on to put before you. I don't know if Harry and Steve, if you are able to access it on the web, maybe, I think it's on there. But
We have a copy. We have a copy, Brad.
Okay, good. I'll just quickly walk through it, and then we can have a discussion, or you can chime in. Again, number one, as Commissioner Albritton certainly knows, is the RAISE grant for the Clearwater Transit Center, to advocate for that. And the sort of action item or tactic to help us be successful in that is hopefully getting a phone call with somebody from USDOT with us and Congressman Christ. Number two is the yet to be approved, but talked about every single day, the infrastructure authorization bill, infrastructure bill that will be significant in many ways for PSDA, that will kind of be the catalyst toward us purchasing a lot more vehicles and getting our solar project going. And then number three on the list is the appropriation, the annual appropriation. And I think, I might be wrong on this, but Harry can correct, that they're on a continuing resolution extension basically until the end of this year before that happens. So I'll stop there. Those are really sort of our bread and butter three priorities for the next year for the federal government. Harry and Steve, do you want to add anything to those three? On those three?
Yeah, to your point about the appropriations, the Congress did approve and the President signed on October 1st a bill to extend the funding for the government through December 3rd, a continuing resolution. So Congress is sort of on, or the government's sort of on operating on automatic pilot for a couple more months. I don't know, we're not sure exactly when they're going to finish their appropriations work, hopefully before the end of the calendar year. I don't know if Steve has any more intel or not, but as far as, you know, you have a project in the House version of the Transportation Appropriations Bill for the inline chargers. I think that, you know, as long as the bills get done sometime this year or early next year, you'll be in good shape on that congressionally directed funded project. So that's good. I'll let Steve talk. Maybe Steve can give you an update on where Congress is with the infrastructure Build Back Better bills and what the outlook is for the other project, earmark project we have in there, which is your solar power project. So Steve, you want to talk about that?
Thanks, Harry, and thanks members of the committee. Just very quickly, because I know you have the federal agenda, draft federal agenda in front of you. I'll just say, you know, we are dealing with three different issues in Washington. One of them is the FAST Act reauthorization, which we haven't talked a lot about because it was sort of subsumed by the infrastructure bill. Congress has extended, that did expire on September 30th, and Congress has extended the FAST Act through October 31st. So while there are no new grants that will be given out during that period of time, because there's a period of sort of relative uncertainty about the long term, they are at least ensuring that funding is flowing, contracts are being fulfilled, reimbursements are being made, and people are not being laid off at FTA, more importantly. So that is in place. The commitment in the House is to try to pass the $1.2 trillion bipartisan infrastructure bill by the end of this month. They are negotiating over the other bill. That bill is in place. It passed the Senate, if you recall. The other bill is the Build Back Better Act or reconciliation, the $3.5 trillion bill, which now seems to be more in the $1.5 to $2 trillion range, if there is a bill at all. And There's a lot of infighting among Democrats right now. They need every single Democrat to support both bills at this point in time to get them through. I'm the optimist when it comes to getting legislation done, and I'm becoming a little bit more doubtful about whether or not the Democrats are going to be able to pull themselves together to get these passed. The key element of the reconciliation or the Build Back Better Act that is highlighted on the legislative agenda for next year is the $10 billion connecting transit to housing, to low-income housing and affordable housing. That $10 billion program is, in my opinion, is at risk of being left on the chopping block, because if they're going to really cut this bill from $3.5 trillion to $1.5 trillion, it appears housing is going to be the one area where they're looking to make reductions. And if they make reductions to housing, they probably will end up cutting out this $10 billion program. And that would be very unfortunate, because this $10 billion program is a one-year program. All $10 billion have to be allocated in the fiscal year 2022, according to the bill. So that is something we're trying to make sure the Congress is well aware that it would benefit PSTA, and trying to keep that in the bill. And I'll just say one last thing about the agenda for next year, the legislative agenda on the federal side. If these bills get enacted, then everything is about implementation. It's about securing grant awards. It's about looking at earmarks for the coming fiscal year and the appropriations bills. It's about trying to bring as much of this money back to PSTA as we can. So with that, I'll turn it back to Harry or the committee and answer any questions.
Hey, Steve, the only thing I would add, Brad, is we have made the request with Congressman Chris. We shared the information that you and Whitney have provided about the event in Clearwater. So they have put together and sent over a request to Secretary Buttigieg's office for a phone call, a virtual meeting to talk about the RAISE grant. So I'll let you know. I'll check in with them again today and see if they have any news from the Secretary.
Okay, thank you.
Gentlemen, do you have any additional information on where we are with parts of the bill where the waterborne transportation agenda is that we might potentially be able to take advantage of?
So I think, Brad, you all have submitted your ferry boat request, I think, for the competitive opportunity that's out there now. Is that correct?
Well, actually, no, that's not correct, Harry.
Oh, it's getting ready to go in.
I'm sorry, what?
I'm sorry, the deadline's coming up. The deadline hasn't.
Yeah.
We haven't hit the deadline yet.
But on the, in the last 2 weeks, there's been some changes to that, and PSTA is not going to be submitting on behalf of Pinellas County or the efforts that we're doing here in Pinellas, but instead supporting a Hillsborough grant this year for the Cross Bay Ferry, the one that goes to Tampa. And then that will, what I hope we can have a discussion at this committee about is then working to get our Hillsborough friends to support our application next year, whether or not they get their grant this year. But that remains to be seen. But Harry, do you know, or Steve, do you know if the bipartisan infrastructure bill or what the level of funding proposed for waterborne is? Is there an increase or a decrease? Do you know what that might be?
So, Brad, there's an additional $1.25 billion in the bipartisan infrastructure bill for the ferry boat program, plus an additional $250 million on top of that for a new pilot program for electric or low emission ferries. So that would be $1.25 billion over 5 years, which would be about $250 million a year for for the ferry boat competition. And then that would be $250 million over 5 years, another $50 million for electric or low emission ferries. So there'd be significantly more money coming down the pike over the next 5 years for competitive ferry boat grants if the bipartisan bill becomes law. That comparison, right now, the ferry boat program is about, I think, Steve, $30 million a year of the competitive pot. So you're talking about going from $30 million a year to 250 million plus a year. So that's a pretty significant increase.
That's great.
Yeah.
We have lots of new ideas to bring forward.
Exactly.
Okay, is that it, Harry?
That's all we have. Happy to answer any questions if anybody has any.
Thank you so much, very informative. Anyone on the committee? Let the record reflect that Gina Driscoll has joined us, so welcome, Gina. Any questions from the committee? No? Okay, then moving on to Ron Pierce and our state agenda.
Well, Madam Chair, if the
No?
committee would like to make a recommendation on these three items being our federal legislative priorities.
Absolutely, that's a given, and I'm so sorry I didn't do that. So can I have a recommendation to approve these recommendations to go to our board?
Second.
Thank you. All in favor?
Aye.
Aye. There you go.
Great job,
you.
guys.
Thank
Thank you.
Okay, now our state legislative update. Ron?
Good morning, Madam Chair, committee
Morning.
members. I'll actually pretty brief, so we may actually set a record for a committee today for you, Madam Chair. Next week is committee week number 2 in Tallahassee. We have Brad attending. He's coming up on Tuesday and Wednesday. I think we have 2 board members, Dan Saraki. So thank you, Dan, for attending, and Jamie Robinson will be joining as well. For this trip, we're really targeting our delegation members, and we're also targeting some agency heads, including DOT and ACA. Some of those have already landed. We'll have an agenda for Brad to be able to share with Jamie and Dan hopefully later today. Tuesday evening, we'll have a dinner with the legislator. We're trying to get 1 or 2 members to join us for dinner on Tuesday. We have a couple meetings Tuesday afternoon. We run most of the day Wednesday, and they head back on Wednesday. So should be a full 2 days. The next trip, which will be during session, Madam Chair, will focus more at that point on House and Senate leadership from a committee standpoint. But we thought it was important for the initial trip to Tallahassee to really focus on our delegation and some of the agency heads that specifically our agenda will speak to. So we do have back-to-back committee weeks. We're in Tallahassee next week for committee week number 2. We're also the following week for committee week number 3. And we have 2 committee weeks in November. One kind of the end of November and the beginning of December. Then session starts on January the 11th. My hope would be at our next meeting to kind of give you more of an update on our agenda as it relates to conversations with the agency heads, as well as any conversations we have with delegation members next week in Tallahassee. I'll be happy to answer any questions that you or the committee members may have.
I trust you.
I think we have Alan Susky on the line as well. So Alan, anything you wanted to add there?
He stayed up too late at the Rays game. Ron, I trust you let us know as soon as possible when your next date comes up during session. I'd like.
Yes, ma'am. And I think we've already got that set, so I'll make sure that we get it out to you and the other members of the committee. Yes, ma'am.
That'd be great. I'd like to attend if my schedule will allow.
Yep.
Yeah.
I should have started my update with really the update, Madam Chair, should have been is the Rays won last night, so we're up 1 game to 0. We play again tonight, and then the Lightning have their home opener on Tuesday night, and they're raising the banner for their 3rd Stanley Cup. So lots of good things for sports fans in Tampa Bay.
Absolutely. And hopefully that'll be an extra added incentive for the legislature to hurry up and get back so they can attend all these fabulous events going on.
Yes, ma'am.
Okay. You have anything else, Brad?
Well, I don't know if I'd like to just ask if Cassandra has anything she'd like to add about this. The decision we made about not applying for the ferry grant for our project this year. Essentially, we felt like since the funding will not be secured for the ferry operations until next year, until the next fiscal year, for the Clearwater, the proposed sort of restart of the Clearwater ferry, we're not in a very, we collectively didn't think we were in a very competitive position to get the grant. Meanwhile, Hillsborough did put in $1 million, so they are in a much better shape.
And we did get a request as well from the mayor.
Yeah, and got several requests from all across the region to support their project. Now, what I want to do is not leave this opportunity. Since we're so nice and civilized and letting them go first, they need to follow suit next year, and no matter if they win or lose this year, they support our project next year.
Well, if they were at the game last night, if they're at the game tonight, I'll be sure I make a pitch for that. Playing nice in the sandbox.
Good.
And so I'm supportive of that. I hope everyone else is.
Yes.
With this caveat, I do think it would be important, Harry, you can, or Steve, you can disagree or agree, if we wrote a very nicely worded letter that it is our intent to submit an application next year and get that in the pipeline so we already have some initiative going forward,
That's an excellent idea.
right?
Yeah.
Cassandra's just looking at me like I've got three heads. Well, guys,
Harry, do you have any advice on how we could make our
intent?
our very great strategery here in the Tampa Bay known in a positive light to the powers that be in Washington, D.C.?
Yeah, I mean, I think, Brad, I think it would be worth doing a call with them at some point, just to give them an update on what you're doing. I mean, I like the idea of writing a letter in support of that application. You could throw in there that we're really trying to emphasize the use of our water resources in the area, and we're working on, you could put a paragraph in about what you're trying to do, just so it's introduced to them. But I think in the new year, we should set up a meeting with FTA to talk about what your initiative in Clearwater, what you're trying to do there, and lay the groundwork for next year. Because as Steve said, the ferry boat program you're applying for now is the annual one. I imagine, Steve, there's going to be one out of cycle with all this. If the infrastructure bill becomes law, they're going to be trying to put this money out pretty quickly, and so they'll probably have another ferry boat application period early next year in the first or second quarter of next calendar year. So I think it's time to get ready for that one.
And I'll just add, Commissioner, your idea of a letter of support, and maybe it was Brad's too, supporting the other application in advance of the PSTA application. DOT loves regional support like that. They love knowing that the grant doesn't just go to one transit agency, but it's supporting the efforts of the entire region. So that's a really good approach.
Well, maybe we could also get one from the county and maybe the city of St. Pete, Commissioner Driscoll, and maybe even T. Barta, maybe.
Yeah, I think that'd be good.
I mean, that would be, oh, and let's not forget the MPO, Forward Pinellas,
Forward, yeah,
right?
absolutely.
So we can pitch that. Cassandra?
You might want to include, Commissioner, you might want to include the Florida DOT, at least if not the state secretary, the district secretary.
Oh, yeah,
That might be a good letter too.
Yeah.
Commissioner Long, can you press the button so she's
Oh.
my son? There. There you go.
Right, so the best part about telling your boss what you're going to say is that he knows exactly what's going to happen. The worst part is that he takes all your talking points. I think that Brad made a very good point about the support at the regional level, and I think that was a very good strategic move for us because our application wasn't as strong as it could be. For an action plan, in addition to the letters, I would recommend that we work on securing the operational funding for the ferry. We can have the best application in the world and have the best support, but if we don't have the operations supported, then it won't get anywhere. And so that is a critical piece to us being successful on the capital side as we seek federal funding, is to make sure that the local support for the operations of the ferry is really solidified.
So with that said, thank you, Cassandra. And with that said, it occurs to me that we have some work to do here in terms of getting all these different partners on board. And maybe we can have a little strategy meeting about how to do that the next time we have our debrief.
Yeah, that's a good idea.
Any other suggestions? Oh, I'm sorry,
I-
Commissioner Driscoll?
Thank you. So would we expect to receive maybe some talking points or a sample letter, just to make sure that we're all on the same page with that language, with each
Yeah.
letter?
Oh, yes, definitely. I mean, we submitted a letter, so I'll send you what we sent.
Right.
I think the chair signed it, but, yeah.
Jamie, did you have,
Nope,
no?
I'm good, thank you.
Jamie?
Yeah, can you, Cassandra, refresh my memory on where we are looking for the capital for the capital for the initial, operations of the ferry? Or is that from the state, or is that from state or federal funding?
So for the operations funding is usually a local issue and needs to come from from a local source. We can apply for state dollars, though those usually do take a couple of years to get. And we could apply under a number of grant programs that could support a portion of the operations for a short period of time. On the capital side, there is a percentage that will come from the feds and a percentage that needs to come from local or state. In that case, the current program is a 20% match, and in the application that we had drafted, we started to look at Tourist Development Council funding for the docks, which still would require a lot of coordination with the county and with the TDC, and toll revenue credits. That is a very soft match, and it's very difficult to win entirely with a match of that kind. And the ferry boats themselves, the vessels, can be quite expensive. And so I think with additional local support for that 20%, we could be very competitive.
If I- Yes, David?
Well, I like the idea that we're putting this off because
Push your button. There you go.
just like the intermodal center.
Push it again. Commissioner Long made a mistake.
That it?
There.
Okay. It's like the intermodal center, I think that we really had all the boxes checked this time. And I think we should be thinking about that with waterborne transportation. And we still have some work to do. I mean, we still have buy-in from, even though I hear good things, but we need to get our ducks in a row before we start applying for these grants, because it'll make a big difference. No sense in doing it if we don't have it, our house in order first, so.
Correct. And anyone else? Jamie?
No, I just, I just would like to see, some, I don't know, so I can visually see, hey, these are, to David's point, I can understand what the boxes are that we need to check off.
Yeah.
Just so I just want to kind of have an idea of where we do I need to start having conversations now with our legislators when we're in Tallahassee next week, or whatever that is. And I'm not saying I need it by then, but, as we move through and prepare, for me, just to have the knowledge of who it would be, advantageous for us to speak with in general conversations, because we all, meet people at the baseball game or whatever it might be, we can have those conversations. So if I kind of have an idea of what that looks like, then it'd be advantageous for all of us, I'm sure, to be able to start having those conversations. But I agree with David that we need to have all those ducks in a row and be able to have a really good application for it next year, and when we're all lined up and ready to go, and have that regional support, because obviously that's going to be important
And
as well.
I'm so sorry. I would like to suggest, as it relates to the TDC, since I heard Cassandra mention that you tread very carefully before you approach them. There's some major roadblocks. I've started the conversation with Steve Hayes, and I'm very aware of the pitfalls, because I had tried to get that before with the Sunrunner. And there's some legal issues that we have to clarify and all get on the same page. So before we start the conversation with staff, let us get that taken care of first. I promise you it's on the radar. Just so you don't immediately get a no and then they don't want to listen anymore, you know what I mean?
Yeah. So just a point of clarification, I believe the deadline is tomorrow for this year? What? Do you know when it is?
The deadline for the ferry grant program
Yeah.
was Tuesday.
Oh, it has already passed. Okay. So the letters that I'm gonna send you, the sample, I don't wanna send you the letter I sent because that was for this grant. What our goal now is to try to have St. Petersburg, PSTA, all those entities we identified, all line up to support the Cross Bay Ferry, to express their support for the Cross Bay Ferry getting funding, and then in the next cycle, the efforts that Ford Pinellas and the Waterborne Transportation Committee are going to be putting forward for the Clearwater project.
So in that regard, getting those letters now into the county admin and the commission is really important because we'll start working on our 2023 budget
Yeah.
very shortly after the first of the year.
Yeah.
Yes.
Good.
So Janet, do you think talking about this with the TMA would be a good thing?
Yes.
Get them on board as well? All the
The
other towns?
TMA,
Well, the Suncoast Transit Authority,
Oh, yeah.
the new,
oh, the Alliance,
yeah, yeah.
they don't really have any authority.
They don't, but that's my thought of really the only group that's out there that could.
But it would look like, you know, it's an MPO that represents 7 counties, and if we could get them to back it as well, that would be,
Go for it. I mean, you don't know if you don't ask.
yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, I think the more we can show support, because when we were lobbying, you may remember, for the money for the Sunrunner, first question out of every congressman or senator's mouth was, do you have regional support? And of course, at the time, we had a bevy of people that were against it, and we were worried about that, weren't we, Brad?
I know.
But they were really good about filtering through the fact that those, in the big scheme of things, were very few loud, angry voters, like, you know, we always have.
CPP.
But they weren't representing the majority, and they went ahead and glossed over it, pretty much, because it, yeah. We don't have to revisit that, but you know what I mean.
Yeah. I mean, I think the TMA is a key group, and if they were able to prioritize these waterborne services, Crossberry, the Clearwater,
Well,
that would be great.
I think we'll get that prioritized properly, because we'll work on our MPO, which has a loud voice there.
Yep.
Yeah. Good thought.
We have a meeting coming up next week, so
Yeah,
we bring it up then.
yeah, we can. Okay. Anything else?
The TMA next week?
Anything else on this end?
No, ma'am.
Anything else from the peanut gallery up there? Harry? Ron?
No, ma'am. Have a good weekend.
Steve?
No, ma'am, go Rays.
Go Rays! Oh my gosh, if they repeat last night, that's just gonna be phenomenal. It was so exciting. Yeah. All right, well then, for the good of the order, we are adjourned. Our next meeting is November 3rd at 9 a.m. By the way, is 9 o'clock good for everybody? or-
Ron, we'll see you Tuesday.
Yeah.
Sounds good. Thanks, everybody. Safe travels.
Bye-bye.
Bye.
Is that good for everybody, 9
I'm
o'clock?
good.
Yep.
Okay, just checking in.
Hold on, November 3rd, I think I already sent, Brad an email.
Did you say there's a TMA meeting next week?
No.
No.
Fort Pinellas.
Yeah,
Oh, Fort Pinellas, yeah. Yeah.
so, Whitney was on there, was she supposed to be, was I supposed to?
No, she's helping putting together the priorities. This document.
Gotcha.
Fred, I sent, an email, I can't make the next meeting because I'll be at the Florida League of Cities Legislative Conference in Orlando.
Yeah.
Which one are you talking about?
Zoom in if we needed to.
What's that?